Hello and welcome to Intro to Painting. This series features simple paintings that anyone can do, so grab your canvas and paints and paint along with me. Today we're going to be painting Tetris, but first, let's talk materials. The first thing you need is something to paint on. Now I'm using canvas, mine is 18 by 24 and it's about 1.5 inches deep. I like 18 by 24, it's a good size, not too big, not too small, and the 1.5 inches will make sense later. You can paint on any size thing you want. The depth doesn't matter either, it just worked really well for what I'm doing. You could paint on paper or canvas board or masonite or wood panels or canvas. It's really up to you to figure out what you like painting on, what you can get pretty easy. You can get these at craft stores like Michael's or AC Moore or Hobby Lobby. Amazon sells a great selection, and I'm actually going to have links in the description going to Amazon affiliate about all the products I'm using, and you can just go pick them up and help support Steven and myself. The second thing you need is something to draw with. Now I like using chalk pastel because I can erase it with a wet towel. It doesn't show underneath paint too much. You can use a pencil if you want, just make sure you draw really light. You can use watercolor pencil, but I would stay away from anything alcohol-based like a Sharpie or other type of marker. That tends to work funky with paint and I don't recommend using it. The third thing you need is something to draw lines with, and I'm using a T-square. You could use a ruler, that's totally fine. I just like the T-square because I can hook it on the canvas and it works good to make sure all my lines are totally square with the canvas. The next thing you probably need is something to wipe your brushes on. Just keep some paper towel around in case you spill paint or water or something. It's good to have around just in case. Also to wipe your brushes off on to get extra paint off them. You'll also want to have some sort of container with water in it. This is just an old yogurt container. The cap you could actually use to mix your paints on, so that's a good recycling thing. But I like using my glass palette, and this is just a glass palette. It's made of tempered glass in case I break it. It just breaks into tiny pieces. This will last you a long time, so if you really like painting and you want to keep painting, this is a good thing to get. It's probably one of my favorite things I use. It's like my favorite tool I have in the studio. This one's lasted me going on 8-9 years now. I used it in college. This is the same one. This is the same tape I used on it in college to hold all the glass shards together in case it broke. And like even some of this paint is from college and not MalMakes. So it's lasted me a long time as long as you're careful with it. It's a great tool to have if you're really serious about painting. You'll also probably want something to mix your paints with, and I use a palette knife. You can get these in plastic or metal. There's a lot of different shapes. This is the shape I like, and they have numbers, but I don't know what they are, and I pretty much only use them for mixing paint. So it's really up to you what you use, but this is a good size and a good shape one, so pick something out, maybe try it if you've never had one before. It keeps your brushes clean so that if you're mixing with a brush and you get all that paint in your brush, and then you go to paint later and you pick up some white paint, but earlier you used red to mix, you're not going to get that red paint because it was on your palette knife, and you can wipe that off a lot easier than you can clean your brush. Speaking of brushes, I have a selection of flats or brights. The difference in flat and bright is just how long the bristle is. So I have a good selection based on how I'm going to be painting. You want to pick a brush that's a good size for the size you use. So I'll be using this one when I'm painting bigger, this one when I'm painting a little bit smaller, and I'll be using this tiny flat when I'm doing small details. I like using flats because I can paint the wide way, or I can turn them on their side and paint fine lines. For this painting, I'm going to be using all flats, but if you like painting with rounds, you can totally grab a round brush. The last thing you need is paint, and I have a white and a black, and I have carbon black and titanium white. I like these two specifically because they're very opaque and they're high tinting, which means if I mix them with another color, I don't need as much of these with that color to change it. So if I'm making a dark blue, I don't need as much carbon black to make it dark blue as if I was using like a low tinting black. So that's why these are great. They're also series 1, which means they're cheaper. And that's not a bad thing when you're using like a brand like Golden. It just means that the carbon in here is cheaper for them to buy and make the paint than something like cadmium, which is a series 9, and cadmium's expensive for them to get, so they charge you more to buy cadmium paints. So that's what's great about these. You'll also need colors for your blocks. Now you could go out and buy 7 different colors for your blocks, which is totally fine, and I would totally do that if I had them sitting here already, but I don't, so I'm going to be making my colors. I have primary yellow, primary cyan, and primary magenta. So I'm going to be using these plus my white and my black to make the rest of them. So let's start talking about how we're going to plan out this painting and how we're going to draw it in first. A normal game is about 10 by 20 blocks. So if I think about having 10 blocks here, I need to figure out how wide each of those blocks is. So I wrote up a formula for you. I have the width of canvas divided by number of blocks equals the size of blocks. So on my calculator, I already know this is 18, but if you don't know how wide yours is, you'll want to measure. I have 18 inches divided by the number of blocks, which is 10, and that equals the size of my blocks, which is 1.8 inches. Now on a ruler, at least with the imperial system, 1.8 is a weird measurement because I have easily 1.5, 1 3/4, and then 1 8/10 is like somewhere in between here, which is a hard measurement to get right 10 times and then however many times that way. So I thought, what would be a good number to use? 2 doesn't work because then I don't have enough blocks. So I thought if I stepped down to 1.5, how many blocks would I then have to have, which is going to definitely be more. So if I take 18 divided by 1.5, I get 12 blocks. So if I do it that way, I'll get 12 blocks across the canvas this way, which is only 2 more than I need. So I thought I could do a border. So I'm going to do a border of blocks the same size as the rest of my blocks, all the way around the edge in a U shape, and then I have 10 blocks inside of that at 1.5 inches, which is a good easy measurement for me to use. So that's how I'm going to be doing this, and I'm going to go ahead and start to grid this. Now with a grid, just move these out of the way, I'm going to be using my T-square, and I'm going to start by going this direction. Doesn't matter, it's just because my easel fits this way with my T-square. And then I'm just going to go ahead and measure every 1.5 inches. So I'm going to take my chalk pastel, and I'm going to come down to 1.5 inches, make a mark, and then I'm going to count another 1.5 inches. So 2.5, 3, make a mark, 4, 4.5, 5.5, 6. So that's how I'm doing that with the grid, and because I have a T-square, I can just use this to line up with each dot and draw a line. If you don't have a T-square and you have a regular ruler, I strongly urge you to do the same thing on the left and the right. Do your marks down both sides because then you can line your ruler up with both of them and you'll have a straight square line. If you don't, you're liable to put your ruler out like this, and it might be at an angle and you won't even notice until you start to draw in your other blocks. So if you don't have a T-square, definitely do your marks down both sides of your paper or canvas. If you have a T-square, you only have to do one. And then we'll just line it up with a mark and then draw across. So I'm going to do that both directions on my canvas, and then we'll start filling things in. You'll also want to do lines going the other direction, so I find it easiest if I just turn my canvas and then I set my T-square over here and do the same marks at 1.5 inches going all the way down the side. With the grid filled in, you can kind of see why I chose to do a canvas that was 1.5 inches deep. When I was doing my plan and trying to figure out how many blocks across I could do, when I got to the number 1.5, I thought my canvases are just about 1.5, so I can put some more blocks over there. I like to wrap my images around the side of the canvas because whether you use a frame or not, it's complete and it looks professional. So I'm going to go ahead and do more of the gray blocks on the side and the bottom and the other side, but that's something I'm going to work on later. In the meantime, with this done, I know that this outside U shape is going to be dark gray. I'm going to leave that alone for now and start to block in where my all the blocks and all the colors are going. So I know all the blocks, I can go ahead and start to fill it in. I'm going to start by doing the Z shape block, just because I have red right here, and I can go ahead and start to mark in where that's going. So I know I'm going to have one there. And you can keep building it this way, randomly skipping blocks. It's really up to you. You can fill in as many or as few as you'd like. I just went ahead and planned this out on paper, so I'm just going to take what I have on paper and mark it in with the canvas. I know on camera it's probably hard to differentiate the colors because in person the orange and the red look very similar in the chalk, But with this all blocked in, I know where my colors are going. I still have my map in case I get confused where they are. And I'm just going to go ahead and start to fill these in. Now the colors I have on hand with the red and the yellow, I'm going to go ahead and block those in first, just because they're straight out of the tube and I don't have to mix any paint. So I'm just going to take the primary magenta and start to fill in the Z shapes, and then the primary yellow and start to fill in the O shapes. I know earlier I said my chalk pastel would blend in with the paint, and now I tend to have a problem with yellow where it doesn't do that, and I tend to push really hard with a chalk pastel just because I'm trying to get it to show up on camera. I'm not worried about it in this instance because I will be doing the beveled edges and it will hide all of that. I just want to make sure I have a nice plain coat to start with. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue to block these in. I have yellow down here, yellow up here, and that's it for my yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and block that in, and then I'll move on to red. Now these three come straight out of the tube, so the next thing I need to do is start mixing the colors that I'm using for everything else. The next one I want to do is the long piece, which is going to be light blue. So on my palette I have some of the cyan and titanium white, and I'm just mixing it in, blending it around with a palette knife, making sure it's all nice and consistent. I can scoop some of it up, flip it back upside down, and then keep mixing. And I don't think this is light enough yet, so I can take a little bit more of the titanium white and mix it in until I'm happy with the color. And that's starting to get there. So once I'm happy with it, I'll just go ahead and start filling in those pieces. The next color I've chosen to do is the orange. Now the orange that's in game isn't quite like a bright hunting orange. It's more of a yellow orange. It's a bit lighter. So on my palette I have the red and yellow to make the orange, and I'm just going to take a little bit of red and mix it into the yellow just to make it a little bit lighter. And it's looking like this might still be a little too yellow. So as I keep mixing this, I'm going to add just little bits of red because I don't want to get it too dark. Now I want to make sure that when I'm mixing paint, it's 100% combined before I add any more, because there might be some extra color on my palette knife or something that I didn't quite mix in well enough that may still affect it. So I want to make sure it's 100% mixed in before I add anything else. And I want to add little bits at a time because if I add too much, it could go too dark and then I'd have to get out more yellow paint and keep mixing in yellow until it's right. So you want to start with your light color, which was yellow in this case, and then mix in the darker color, which was red, and you want to use little bits of paint at a time. It's harder to go back, it's hard to go from dark to light, and you don't want to end up with too much paint. I already have too much of this light blue color over here, and I don't want to have too much of every color when I'm done. The next color I'm going to mix is purple, and I picked it just because I still had some red left over from mixing the orange. So I have blue and red on my palette. I'm just going to take a little bit of red and mix it into the blue. Now the problem with purple is that it tends to be very dark when you make it with paint. It's going to be like almost so dark you can't tell if it's blue or purple sometimes. So what I might do is I might add a little bit of white paint using the same method. So once I'm happy with the purple I have, if it's too dark, I might just add a touch of titanium white to it to lighten it up. So I'm just going to keep adding red into it until I'm happy with it, and it's far enough away from the regular blue paint that it doesn't look blue. To make the green, you mix yellow and blue, so I have some blue on my palette with a little bit of yellow. And just like before, yellow is the lighter color, so I'm just going to mix a little bit of blue into it. And I kind of want more of a yellow green and not like a big bright grass green color. So that's why I'm starting mainly with yellow. And I just want to add little bits of blue into it until I'm happy with it. All of the color is blocked in, so the next thing I'm going to do is use that carbon black to fill in everything that's going to be solid black. Now, From this square all the way down, across, and all the way up back to this square is going to be that gray, including on the sides. Across the top, however, it's going to be the carbon black too. So I want to start to fill that in just so later, after I start to get everything else done, I can flip the canvas upside down and do the blocking in of the gray across the bottom. So I'm starting with this, so this dries by the time I'm ready to flip it. The border is going to be gray, so I'm just mixing some white and black together, and I'm just using little bits of black and mixing it in until I'm happy with it. I do want it a lot darker than it is right now, but I don't want to overmix it or put too much black in it because it'll be way too dark, and then I'll have to add a ton of white to make it lighter. Here's the great thing with this painting, you can do different levels with it. For example, you can do less blocks, so there's less to add a bevel to. If you're not comfortable with doing a bevel, what you can do is take some black paint and basically just repaint in your grid. Fill in all the vertical lines and all the horizontal lines and break up all your blocks. It'll still look like Tetris and still look really nice and professional. But what we're going to be doing is adding a bevel to all these edges. So all of the tops and left sides of each block will be lighter, and the bottoms and right sides of each block will be darker. So we'll be mixing tints and shades of each of our colors. So the first thing I want to do is take a white chalk pastel pencil, which I probably should have mentioned in the materials section. And you could use pencil. I can never get pencil to write on top of paint, which is why I use the chalk. It shows up nice. It erases a lot better than the gray I had before, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is basically redraw in my grid so I can see where all my lines are, because I can't tell like where this line is exactly, and I want to make sure it's perfect. So I'm just going to go ahead, remark in my grid with chalk, and then we'll start on the bevel. The next thing I'm trying to figure out is how big I want the bevel to be. So I took this square and just kind of roughly marked in the bevel. Now I'm going to use my ruler to kind of see how big it is and kind of try and figure out a nice even measurement for it, and it's looking like it's going to be just about 1/4 of an inch. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my T-square and go ahead and draw in 1/4 inch from each of these so I can start to fill in the bevel in all directions. So basically it's like drawing a smaller square inside of all these. So doing that, it's going to help me try and figure out where the bevel goes, so I don't have to worry about just freehanding it and some of them being bigger or smaller. I'm just marking it in for myself to help myself out. I know this looks like a mess right now, but once we start painting it'll make some sense. So I'm starting with purple, just because you could start with anything. You could start with the gray or any of the other colors, but I'm just picking purple because it's on the top left of my palette. So on my palette I have some titanium white paint, and I'm just going to take a little bit of this purple and mix it in until I'm happy with how dark it is. I want it to be different enough from this purple that it's not that purple, and I don't want it to be pure white, so somewhere in between is good. Once I'm happy with this color, I'm just going to go ahead and start to fill in the tops and the lefts of all the bevels. And I'm trying not to erase my chalk accidentally with my hand, so you do have to be a little bit careful with it. But I'm just going to go right along this left edge, and then at the corner here I'm going to do a diagonal. So I'm going to cut from the very outside corner to the inner corner, and then bring it up. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that for every block. I'm not doing it by shape, I'm doing it by block. So it'll be the left and the top, the left and the top, the left and the top, and the left and the top for each single block that's purple. The first few colors are going to be a little bit tough because you're trying not to smear your chalk marks. And I know that, so what I was trying to do is trying to brace myself like in this open area and paint very carefully so I wouldn't smear any of the chalk. But once the colors start to get blocked in, you don't have to worry about that because they'll already be painted. And then you just have a few to worry about and not the entire thing. So next what I'm going to do is start to paint in the bevel for the shadow of the purple. So what I have on my palette is this purple and then some of the black, and I'm just going to mix very little bits of black into the purple to make it a dark purple. You can go too much too quickly and then you'll just have black paint and not have a dark purple. You want something in between both. Like I said with the white, you don't want it too white, you don't want it too purple, you want it right in between. So add very, very little bits of black into the paint. You can always add more, but it's too hard to take away, especially if you've used up all your purple and you don't have any more. So once I have that mixed up, I'm just going to do the same thing as I did with the white, just being very careful and making like this L shape down here on all of these, and then we'll move on to another color. So my next color is blue, the light blue, and I'm just mixing up a lighter blue with titanium white. And just like the purple, I'm just going to go ahead and start to fill it in inside my guidelines. And I'm just being really careful so I don't have to repaint the light blue or something else later. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that with this light blue. I'll do it with all the other colors. And you may notice that like some of them are a bit more opaque than others, like this light blue, you can't really see anything behind it, but the orange you can kind of see stuff and you can see some of the canvas through it. Some of them may need another coat of the base color, but I'll worry about that once I get there. In the meantime, I'm just kind of going through the colors I have and filling in the bevel, and if I need to do another coat, I'll just paint the middle square with that coat. So I was working on filling in the shade for the orange blocks, and I had mixed up the orange color with some black, and I thought it was good, and then I put it on the canvas and it's just way too dark. So I've mixed up a new one, and then I'm just going to go ahead and continue painting these in, and then when this is dry I'll just repaint over it. I have all the front blocks done, and I want to go ahead and start working on the side ones. Now I'm going to be cutting that part from the video just because I'm going to be turning the canvas all different directions, and some of it I'm going to have to stand up because that's a long ways up there and I can't see it otherwise. And the same with the bottom. Now if you do have a canvas where you are going to be painting the sides, don't set it down when it's wet because it will stick to things. So I'm going to start kind of at the top and then rotate it and do the side, and by then the top should be dry so I can paint the bottom, and then I should be able to rotate it again to do the opposite side. So I'm just going to kind of keep rotating it as I paint it, and I'm just going to kind of continue these same blocks over here by painting the lights and the darks for each one. After that, I'll talk about how I'm going to get rid of this chalk and then the final thing we have to do. So you can see the sides all done, and you can see I did do them in the block, which gives it a really nice effect, especially with this painting, just because this is the same depth as the width of the blocks. So it kind of looks like the painting is made up of the blocks, which I think is really, really neat. It has a really cool 3D effect, and now I just have to get rid of the chalk and sign my name. So I have a old towel here, and I just have some water, and I just have a spray bottle, but you could definitely just run this under the faucet and just wring it out so it's not dripping. So I'm just going to spray some water on this, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start to kind of scrub at this. Now you don't want to scrub too hard, just enough to get the chalk erased, and you don't want to do it when it's wet, so you definitely want to let it dry. And because I've been spending so much time doing all the edges, I know for sure the face of this is dry. So I'm still not scrubbing too hard. All of the other blocks got painted over, so there wasn't much chalk to erase, but on the black there was definitely a lot more, and I can still see some of the chalk in there, and I don't want to scrub too hard with my towel. And because it's just a nice solid black color, I can easily repaint. I'm just going to go ahead and repaint that, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the same paint and just sign my name in the corner. And we're done! We have our Tetris painting. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a print or a poster or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmail.com. And if you've painted alongside me today, I'd love to see it, so please post it online with the hashtag MalMakes. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.